Today I'm going to be mending some jeans, and I've just uncovered my Singer Model 237. These were made between 1968, I believe, and 72. Now, jeans have become expensive. A lot of clothes, specifically, and only come from China now. So we're paying higher prices for some things, and what that means is that you might want to be mending your clothes more often. Now, this is a pair of jeans that, believe it or not, this has chain stitching. These are made with chain stitch and serged edges. I have ripped out the outer seam. The pants are inside out, and then I ripped out the outer seam. Now, the reason I did that is so that I can take the fabric and put it under the needle of the machine without having a free arm. If I had a free arm, I could kind of scrunch the whole leg or go in from the top and slide the whole leg right onto the free arm and do it that way. But when you don't have one, you want to open up the easiest seam to open. This is a felled seam on the inside for strength. Much harder to open and re-stitch. But the outer seam just had the chain stitching and an over edge with a serger. So now you want to work from the inside. And I have several fabrics. Get yourself some scrap fabrics, and I had some red, which I have right here, and when I make sure you put it on the front of the pants to see what it's actually going to look like. I love this red fabric, but it was way too bright, and these pants have worn out, not on the knees, but on the front, above the knees on the front. So the first thing to do is to take your patch, and this is it goes all the way down to the bottom here. Lay it on where you have to sew, and then pin it in place with the fabric flat, making sure that you're keeping. See, there's a gap there where the hole is on these pants, and so as I pin this, I want to make sure everything is kept flat. So I'm going to do that and pin the two legs, and I'll be back to show you how to do that, how to stitch it. There's a couple of different ways to stitch it. Okay, so I have pinned the legs. Pin the patches to the legs. This is what, I'll show you one. This is what that looks like. And I have several pins in place, simply because this is how, a couple of weeks ago these started to rip, and so what I did was I still had them on actually, and I just whip stitched the whole together, hoping it wouldn't get bigger from the front as I had the pants on. And then it kept ripping and got worse, and so now it's a bigger hole and puckering. So I've got a lot of pins in place. This is a wool plaid fabric that's fairly flat and thin, so that as I wear the pants, I'm not really going to notice that it's a second layer of fabric. Now, the other thing you want to go into this thinking that you're actually rebuilding the fabric of the jeans. And see, even this patch, it's not going to cover all of it. And I'm going to have to do a second patch over to the side here. I don't know if you can see that. But you want to do one patch at a time. And I mean, these jeans fit perfectly, and you know, it's just easier to fix them. Now, darning, when you do darning, you would still put a fabric like this there, although depending on the size of the hole, you don't have to. If you had a small hole, you wouldn't have to. But darning is doing rows of stitches this way and then that way. And what you're doing is rebuilding the fabric. With this, because there's an edge that would fray to the patch itself, I will probably use a zigzag stitch to go around the edge of the patch and then tack the patch in place by going back and forth and then up and down, but I won't have to do it as filled in as I would have if I didn't have the fabric there. So it's actually fun to do this, and there's a level of creativity. Some of you may have seen my other pants where I use this particular machine for embroidery, and instead of patching an area, I embroider over it using a satin stitch and adding words and flowers and all kinds of stuff. There's a lot you can do with sewing. Now, I did not open the seam more than like 8 or 9 inches. So as I do this, I have to make sure that the bottom layer of the jeans does not creep back over under where I'm sewing. So I now have it set up to start by doing a zigzag around the edge, and I'm going to have to totally lost what I was just going to say because I'm switching the machine to a zigzag stitch. This machine has 3 widths of zigzag. So you want it on a zigzag width and center needle, and I'm going to put it at about 10 stitches. Don't mind that. Just something falling over. This is one of the better vintage machines to have to do a lot of different things. That's what I was going to say. I'm going to have to move the pins out of the way as I do this because you don't want to run over pins if you can help it, even if your machine can do it. And I've got a green thread which is kind of neutral with these different colors. Now once it's tacked in place like that, now I lost my pen cushion, you can take the pin right out, but I'll have to leave the center pins in there until I get to that area. And see, this is, I only have a couple of inches here. I have to make sure that bottom layer stays out of the way while I'm doing this. Okay, so I have actually gone ahead and finished one leg that I will show you in a minute. But this is the leg that had just one patch that had to be added to it. And I'll show you how I did the other one. Now, on another pair of pants I'm going to show you in a minute. And if you were doing, say, very delicate fabric, you would want to fill the whole area with lines that go in both directions. What I've done, because this is denim, because these pants are mainly going to be for, I don't know, garden work or hanging around, or, you know, they're not fancy tailored pants or anything like that. I'm doing a grid that is basically about a ½ inch between each line. So I've already got my zigzag on the edges, and I'm just going to fill in this patch with that grid. I'm sorry, you need to switch from zigzag to straight stitch on your machine. And it's very easy to do this quickly. And again, you want to keep that underneath fabric out of the way. Now technically, with true darning, you do fill in the whole area with lines of stitching that are very close together. The jeans will be in the way for a moment. Hopefully they won't hit the camera. So as you can see, you go up one way, then travel for about a ½ inch along the zigzag stitches you've already put in. So even though this is a little bit of shifting fabric around, it actually goes very quickly. And by not filling in this area very tightly, I'm not trying to rebuild the denim. I am really securing another piece of fabric to the area that is going to reinforce the denim. You know, it used to be that we would get the iron-on patches and glue them on with an iron on the front, but this is much more comfortable to wear. Those patches are always very stiff. It's also a way to use your scrap fabrics, and in a minute I'm going to show you how you can be a little bit more creative. Now, even if your fabric bottom layer gets caught, it's not very difficult to just have a little seam ripper handy and rip out a few stitches to uncatch it. So this is taking 1, 2, 3, 4, about 5 rows, vertical rows. And then it'll be about 8 rows that go side to side. But already, especially with this wool that I'm using for the patch, the whole leg is stronger. You can feel the leg of the pants is stronger. Now, I had mentioned earlier, make sure you try out your patch fabric by placing it on the front of the jeans. And what I meant at that time was you want to make sure that if a lot of fabric shows from the patch, that it's going to go along with the clothing that you're repairing. And that the red I was using was too bright. But at the same time, you could be doing this same method. I have the patches on the inside. You could be doing the same method with the patches on the outside for that patched look. When I was a teenager, we used to just, for the most part, hand sew patches on. But that was a time when Levi's which were the jeans we had most of the time. Levi's were made in America then, and they were made of American cotton, which the products coming out of China right now for denim can't match American cotton denim. I mean, there's just no comparison. These are fairly heavy jeans, or, well, they're not heavy, but they're somewhat well made, and yet these aren't old enough to be falling apart like this. And this is the other pair that I'm going to show you. You may have heard me talk about. They're my I Hate Levi's pants, because Levi's started making everything in China, and now the denim is just not, it's not up to standards. But on the upside, it gives us a chance to be creative. It would be better if we got a better product, but if we can't, we can be creative. Now that time I just moved the fabric under and I didn't bother stitching. You can do that also. You could even, so there I've just done one row. You could even lift up the needle, move it the 1/2 inch or however far you want to go, throw it into reverse, go backwards, and then do it again. So making 8 rows that are horizontal to the patch, it doesn't take long at all. Now I had light blue bobbin thread, and then the bobbin ran out. Now I've got green. This is going to show up on the front, but I'm doing that on purpose with this pair. Normally I would be using like a medium blue thread, which will kind of melt right into the fabric. Okay, one more row and I've got this done. Now I'm saying this is done because I have another plan for these pants. Again, you can fill this in as much or as little as you want to, as long as you have enough of a grid structure there to hold the fabric in place and reinforce the denim. Okay, so that didn't take long at all to get that on there. And now I want to show you a couple of things. So at some point you want to trim off all your loose threads. And see, I wasn't careful enough. On that last row, I caught the underneath fabric. So my seam ripper is in the other room. I'll use scissors and just pull that out and fix that. But I'll have to go back over that because I don't want uncaught threads, because those will then end up coming out. So I'll just go over this row in a moment. But this is what it's going to look like on the front. And so right now you're thinking, oh, well, that's not so pretty. No, it isn't. But this is what it looks like on the inside. The reason I'm doing it this way with these pants is because I'm going to go over these loose threads. I'll go over those with a zigzag stitch just to hold them down. But what I'm going to have is a grid holding supporting fabric in place. All these loose threads will be gone. And what this gives you then is a foundation for hand embroidery. You can very easily do chain stitch flowers to cover like this if you want, or up here where this is all kind of ratty looking. You can put a chain stitch flower there. This is also thin enough to do embroidery with a satin stitch and letters and words and stuff like that. So I plan on using this as a foundation panel that I can now by hand add different designs to. If I had wanted to, I could have just as easily put that on the outside, and that's what we'd be looking at. Now when you're done with whatever you're doing for the design, this is where your handy stitch comes in, which is a small handheld chain stitcher. These jeans were put together with a chain stitch and an over-edge stitch with a serger. But what I can do now, and I've worn pants like this, if I'm not sure what design I want to do, I want to make sure the fabric lies flat, I want to draw something on there in marker or something, and then see if I don't like it, I can wash it out. If you're not done yet, and you're not ready to make a permanent lock stitch seam, you can take a handy stitch, which I have several videos up about them, and you just chain stitch this seam back together, and then turn the pants right side out. And like I said, I've worn them with just a chain stitch holding that in place until I'm finished with the design. Now the other leg came out very similar with two patches. And you can see I kind of swerved. That's the only, well, there's another swerve. So it's not perfect, but it's more, doing it this way with the wool on the inside and a second patch up here is more functional than when I was a teenager. What I might have done is taken a patch of fabric, turned under the edges, and then just hand stitched it in place. And by doing it with machine with a grid like this, it's much stronger. It's much stronger. So now that I've gotten the big hole done and I've got an extra area for design work, if there's a little tear that develops, I can patch it fairly quickly and add to the design. Now let me grab another pair of pants for a moment and show you something. These pants I had done the same thing with, only on this particular leg I had done more of darning stitch, where I just kind of went wild and went all over the stitching. But even with that, it's starting to come out above. It's still ripping. These are the I Hate Levi's pants. So I now have a total of 3 new patches on the inside of these. And so at this point you'd be saying, why not just throw them away? Well, because a new pair of pants is like $55. It's a simple answer. So whether, you know, it's not like I need to wear them to a dance or a party or something, but I can wear them all the time and they're still functional. They also can make a statement. That's satin stitch with this machine saying USA. The other leg has on 7800 missing, MIA, Korean War. You can, you know, in the 70s, we had a blast doing this. And you weren't cool if your pants didn't have some kind of embroidery on them. And so we can get back to that with preserving the function of the clothing and yet using creativity. So when I finish these patches, I can stitch this back up with the handy stitch. And then you can get yourself, this is a very simple sewing box. You can also use just a little inexpensive hand sewing kit. But this one I got on Amazon. I like this one. It comes with 12 colors of thread, snips, a seam ripper, needles, pin cushion, and it's just a nice little box that you can keep. And you put some embroidery floss in there and you're good to go with machine stitching a foundation using a handy stitch for really basting the seams together. Make sure that your last thread goes through the last loop to lock your seam, especially if you're going to wear them. And then a hand sewing kit to do embellishments on the front. When you know you're finally done with your design, then you bring your pants back over to a machine, trim all this fraying off, and just do a lock stitch seam right up there. It's fun, it's creative, it's economical. It's also like a fundamental skill that makes you feel better. And, you know, without getting into a lot of it, so let's say, oh wow, my pants are falling apart and I don't have $55. By the time you finish this, which takes like an hour at the most, your brain has changed to, wow, look what I can do. Away from, I don't have any money, to, wow, look what I can do. It makes you feel better. And it's always a positive. Let me show you a little bit better views. I thought the camera was backed up further than it was, and I apologize for having my arm in most of that last part of the video. These are the pants that I'm adding 3 patches to, that I have pinned in place, and on the outside, these are the ones that have satin stitch embroidery, and I need to add a patch just under where I have that done. The other pants that I started the video with are right here, and this is basically what they look like on the front. I have not stitched up the seams yet. Now to me, this, even with the lighter color thread that shows, this is less obvious than if I had put bright red patches on them. And like I said, now this will get hand stitching that will make them pretty. It's almost like painting with thread, because then, so you can think of this as your canvas, and now it's reinforced. And now you can use different methods to go ahead and, whether it's hand sewing or machine sewing. And this is the area right here that I had kind of really filled in with thread. Now, what that is doing is holding all of the loose denim threads in place, but that gives you a large white looking area, even if it's correct. So to my mind, on this, when this other pair of pants started to do the same thing, instead of ending up with white areas like that, putting a patch on the inside and basically quilting it to the pants now gives me a foundation to use for creativity. So again, I apologize that that one clip is going to have you looking at my arm for too long, but don't get discouraged by that, and grab a pair of pants and a sewing machine, and even if you have to, pretend there's a hole there, put a patch on, and then get out your embroidery floss or a needle and thread and make some pictures.